All right, guys, so in this video, I want to talk about one of the most important factors when you're scaling an AI agency, which is reducing operational drag and how to set that up in a way that's going to allow your employees to get more work done without taking as much time. So what sparked this is a good friend of mine who's currently running an agency, kind of following what I do, which is pure lead gen. They were scaling, but they were having to add a lot of team members. So they're adding VAs, they were adding salespeople, they were adding managers, they were adding CSMs, and a bunch of people were having to fill a bunch of roles. And the problem is it sort of like was this sort of two steps forward, one step back type of situation where the more revenue they brought in, there was also more expenses associated with it. And one important sort of thing to know in business is you rather be able to make more money while basically bringing in less revenue. Ideally, you want your margins high, because if you're only netting 10K a month, you're bringing in 100K a month, so that means you have 90K in expenses. A small 5% boost in expenses could make you go negative, right? So it's basically you're taking on more risk. And so one of the things he started asking me, because our agency is extremely lean, and any sort of agencies I build, I generally only need one or two team members max, even when it's doing 100, 150,000 a month. And so one of the things he brought to me was like, hey, how do I continue to scale this without adding more operational drag? And we ended up talking, and he ended up paying me actually for a consulting session. We went really super in depth. I kind of showed him some of the back end systems within our business. And after kind of going through everything, he had three core takeaways, and that's what I want to share with you guys today. So I'm going to run through all three of those now. So the first big thing is don't overcomplicate what doesn't need to be overcomplicated. There are so many different numbers that you can track, and there are different things that you can basically be moving around: pipeline stages, spreadsheets, Slack notifications, all these different things. And the issue is that every single extra layer of tracking you add, while they're valuable, they also add more friction to every single action that's taken. So to give you an example from this client, who I kind of went in and dug through their Go High Level on our consulting call, he had multiple pipeline stages, and those pipeline stages in Go High Level would trigger certain actions. But the issue is that every single pipeline would track basically when a lead was closed for a client. And that means because he had a bunch of different clients, at the end of the day, when they were tracking who needed to be billed, they would have to go through 25, 30 different actual Go High Level sub accounts and then check the pipeline. On top of that, for every single client that had a new lead come in or a new appointment get booked, the person had to manually go to Go High Level, switch the account, which if you used Go High Level, there's this very long load time. So that was an extra drain. Then they had to go to the pipeline stages, find the lead, and then manually drag it over. And that became a huge drain because that was an extra minute to 2 minutes going just to update a singular lead. And so what I like to think about is, if I were to look back on 3 months of a business, what are the biggest indicators and biggest things I need to look at? And so I want to know on a week by week basis how many leads we sold, how much revenue we brought in, what our expenses were, how much we profited from that, how many were paid in full versus how many were one at a time. But there were a lot of little things like extra tags he would add to certain leads, or certain super distinctive pipeline stages that were never actually going to be used for any sort of big decision making. And we just removed all of that because that extra tracking added extra friction and slowed down the entire operation as a whole. So in short, if you can have one end of day report, one simple way to update leads pipeline stages, one simple way to onboard clients where you don't have to update one action in 5 different locations, that's going to reduce a huge amount of friction in terms of your overall operation and mean that you need a lot less team members to actually make things happen. So the second thing we looked into that was very valuable to remove was unnecessary platform shifts. And what I mean by this is shifting between different CRMs. So Asana, Close, Go High Level, Slack, right? You want to keep your team members as much as possible within 1 to 2 platforms max. And as I actually mentioned on that earlier point, for every single lead that came in, along with having to update the pipeline stage, they also had to manually log into that Go High Level sub account to send a message to that lead to say, hey, you've been scheduled. And the reason this wasn't done with an automation, by the way, is because each message was slightly different based on the location and the client and all of that stuff. But point is, that person had to manually go, log in, transition into Go High Level based on a Slack notification. Then they had to shift a pipeline in there. Then they had to message the person. And then they had to go back to Slack and update it there. They had to reply under the message and then drop it in the Ring the Bell channel. And so there are a bunch of different steps, and they're having to go back and forth and back and forth. It started to add a huge amount of time, again, on people switching between platforms. So the next thing we added for this client was leveraging trigger links instead of having to go and manually start automations. This means that when a lead was sent into the Slack channel, instead of that person having to go into the Go High level and update it manually, there are a list of trigger links, and that person would kind of do a final check, make sure that the lead looked good, and if it did, they would just click those trigger links, and that would activate everything within Go High level. And this would take a 2 to 3 minute task, if not longer, down to literally a 10-second of clicking different links, and then boom, it's done. So in terms of actually implementing this for you, find the core platform you want to keep your clients on, and this will generally, for me, be Slack and Go High Level. Have one sub account that they manage any sort of texting through on Go High Level, and then within the Slack, have any sort of things that need to be included, whether it's information on the client, their phone number, the last message they sent, trigger links to activate an automation within that client sub account. Have everything listed out in that one Slack message so they don't have to go anywhere else to open it. So that way they can just have two tabs open side by side and they can manage everything from there. A good rule of thumb is if it takes more than 30 seconds to set up your workspace in the morning of opening tabs and placing things around your screen, then it's probably overcomplicated. And again, we want to remove as much complexity as possible from these tasks so that your team member can just focus on getting as many of them done and executing at a high level instead of having to worry about all these little things they need to update and little things they can forget or not do. Now, the third biggest thing was figuring out how to leverage AI in a way that was actually useful to the business. So the main issue I see in terms of like plugging AI is people try and like force it into spots where it's not really necessary. They're like, oh, we could have AI write a confirmation message to people when they book. It's like, well, you could also just use an automated booking message and it would work just as well, right? So unnecessary use of AI, other things like that. In this instance, one of the issues that they ran into was they had a big inbox. They're getting a lot of responses, and this is, through DMs. And so one of the things that would end up happening is they'd have to cover a bunch of different inboxes. They'd have to sift through for who's replying. Are they good, positive or negative replies, right? There are a lot of different things they had to sort through. And so this is actually one of the best uses of AI. It's where there's not a super cut or dry, positive or negative reply, like a yes or a no. But it's a pretty simple task that any human could do. Is this a positive intent or a negative intent? And the main reason it added friction is because they need 5 different VAs to comb through all of these inboxes. And what ended up happening is, one, leads would slip through the cracks because they would miss them in between all the different negative messages. They'd miss positive replies. And two, if they open inbox 1, each VA was managing multiple inboxes. They open inbox 1, don't see a positive reply, go to inbox 2, and then immediately there's a response in inbox 1. They don't see that until they've cycled through all the rest of the inboxes and get back to inbox 1. Plus, as you can probably imagine, people, even virtual assistants who are used to doing repetitive tasks, when you do the same thing all day, it becomes super monotonous and it's easy for you to miss things. And so there we plugged in an AI integration where the AI has a huge amount of context on what went into this conversation. And then based on that reply, it sends back the last message to the AI, has the AI analyze it, and then has the AI spit out a response. And then based on that response, we then have conditional logic on what the AI spits out. We'll force it down one of two paths. And if it's a positive reply, then it'll activate an automation that will essentially send it to the Slack channel and notify them there. And that means instead of having to log in and switch between a bunch of different Go High Level sub accounts, all they need to do is have one VA monitor the Slack channel. And when there's a positive reply in the Slack channel, which is very easy to see because Slack will list all those channels visually, super easy to switch between them. When you get that notification, boom, go to that channel, double check it's actually a positive reply. If it is, hit those trigger links, and then everything is activated from there, and they never have to log into the sub account. But this cut their average speed to lead from somewhere closer to 10 minutes down to around 5 to 10 seconds. And there's a 336% increase in the odds of that lead converting if you hit them within the first 30 seconds. So that by itself gave a massive boost, and he said it himself, that was more than worth the entire consulting call we had together. Now, I know these 3 takeaways, they seem relatively small, but the result of that is that he's been able to bring his team to one core VA who's able to manage literally everything, which now cuts down on a bunch of costs. And then every single lead is getting hit within that 5 to 10 second range instead of sometimes 10 minutes plus. And so that means the conversion rate on those leads spiked. And so those little tweaks just by themselves have more than doubled what he was doing in terms of profit because of the combination of the extra money coming in and then the lower expenses associated with it. On top of that, he doesn't have to spend as much in terms of advertising because so many fewer leads are one, slipping through the cracks, and two, going 10 or 15 minutes without being contacted and then being lost forever. And so there you go. Those are 3 key tips that gave a huge boost in profitability to one of the clients I consulted for. One important thing I want to say is obviously not all of these might apply to your business right now. The important thing is look at first principles. So the way I approach the problem and then solve for it, look at what I'm doing in terms of increasing efficiency, reducing drag, decreasing unnecessary costs, finding things that can be automated. Those simple levers, if you start to think that way and approach your problems that way, you're going to be able to find solutions that you normally would not think of. And if you do want hands-on help from someone who's running multiple agencies that together are doing well over 6 figures in profit every single month, then I'm going to link a calendar below that you can click on. You can schedule on to speak with me one-on-one. It'll be a 15-minute call. We'll dive into the specifics of your business, what's going on, what areas might be able to be improved, and I can show you some of our systems for things you're struggling with. And if at that point you feel like you'd like to get a little more hands-on help, either on a consulting basis or even a potential small equity partnership deal, then we can talk about that as well. And if you want an extremely in-depth masterclass on the exact business model I run, I'm going to link that right here. You can go ahead and click on that, watch that video through. It's very in-depth. One of my 8-figure entrepreneur mentors said it was the single best masterclass they've had in his program, and the entirety of that program being around. And so I'm giving that to you guys free. Go watch that, enjoy that, take some notes, and hopefully you got a ton of value. I will see you in the next one. Cheers.